Change won't happen overnight, my friends. My name is Amy Ballantyne. Welcome to Power to the People Pleasers. I'm so excited to have my guest here. Tatiana, welcome.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for having me.
I am excited for our conversation about change. I know you have a lot to share about this. And before we get into this, I would love if you answer the question I ask everyone. Have you ever been a people pleaser? And if so, how did that show up in your life?
Oh my goodness. Yes, I was. And, I probably still am. I have noticed that it is it is something that we tend to be in denial for the longest time. And then even when we're finally ready to recognize, it still takes quite a lot of work, which aligns with our topic for today, because change is not going to happen overnight. The way how it played out in my life, well, the way I finally recognized it is because I was getting angry at coworkers, and I kept asking myself why. And that why created one long chain of, well, why do you do that? Well, I want to do it because it's right. Well, why do you want to show them it's right? And then at the end of a very long why chain, I found that desire to please people lurking, and it was a surprise, because I was one of those people in denials in denial. So it has been a process to first accept it, then to remember to notice when I have that urge to say things or not say things, and then also to give myself the space and grace that it's not going to happen overnight, and I'm making progress. So every day I try to be kind to myself.
Oh, I love that. And I'm so glad you brought up the space and grace comment. I wrote that down because I loved when you said that when we first met. And if there was a wish that I had for individuals listening and all people is that they gave themselves the space and the grace to recognize they're a human. We put
Yes.
a lot of pressure on ourselves.
Mhm.
Let's be a little more kind, right? So, before we jump into our topic today, I'd love to share your bio for all of the listeners. Tatiana was a physics professor, researcher, and academic coach for over 2 decades. Currently a community college administrator, Dr. Gwon has also studied and explored metaphysical topics for as long as has worked in physics. Following a personal transformation in 2020, she has integrated her conventional academic background with her unorthodox explorations and has emerged as a fresh and innovative voice for personal transformation and a new way of life, which she calls effortless reality. Oh, love that. And drawing from her firsthand research and experience with astrology, the philosophy of yoga, and various energy practices, Dr. Gon speaks on change, growth, and life choices with grace, gentleness, and humor on her podcast, Effortless Reality. So you can check that out as well. And I know that you have a book coming out in 2025. So we're so excited to have you here today. And I'd love if I know that part of your journey is around this change from physics to coaching. Can you share a little bit more about this story?
Oh yes. The coaching actually came quite unexpectedly, and it's one of those things, again, by the time you realize what you're doing, you have been already doing it for quite a bit. I remember thinking back in the past, I remember being extremely frustrated, because as part of my job to be a professor of physics at the community college, about a quarter of my job duties were to actually meet with students and advise them. Now, that's the official word, advising.
Mhm.
And advising means, okay, you take this class, you don't take that class, how are you doing in your classes? But I ended up not doing that, because that takes 10 seconds. And then students usually are entitled to about 30 minutes of my time. And they were very respectful and ready to, like, immediately jump out of
Mhm.
my office. And I would just say, hey, let's just get to know each other. And then one thing would lead to another, and I'll end up actually almost like mentoring them. But mentoring also meant, well, I know how to do things and I'll show you my way. But a lot of students were very bright, and so they didn't even need mentoring. They needed someone to say, hey, why do you do that? Well, I chose engineering because I wanted to prove to my family that I can do it. And I said, life is too short. You shouldn't be proving anything to anybody. You should be enjoying yourself. And when you pick a field that you naturally star, you will be the star. Don't you want to be the star in your life? And so it led to a lot of frustration because I was going home and I loved the work, but I would say, okay, I'm not advising. This is not a mentoring. What am I trying to do here? And what am I doing with my students? Until a friend once, she said, well, have you looked up what life coaching is? And that all of a sudden put everything into perspective for me. And I said, wow, I have been a life coach all this 10 years at least at the college, where officially my title was a professor, an advisor, an assistant dean, all those like
Yes.
conventional titles. And it was a very liberating and inspiring moment. That's like, aha, I'm not alone. There are other people. And I started connecting and, comparing notes, exchanging tools, what works, what it doesn't. And it put everything in a little bit more conscious perspective for me.
I love that. And it's so wonderful to see this merging of the traditional, and I'm going to use some of your workplace titles, and the non-traditional coming together, you calling out that a professor, a PhD is also a life coach. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. I'm so happy.
Yes, yes. And when you tag along some of the more non-traditional metaphysical topics like
Hmm.
astrology, it sometimes it feels scary. And
Mm.
this is where it is scary, and I tell myself, well, how are you going to coach others if you cannot push yourself out of your comfort zone and you see how it feels and relate to that? Because otherwise I'm just teaching according to the book, which is much more theoretical than my taste.
Mm.
So the whole push yourself has helped me find my authentic voice and place
Mm.
myself within the group of people who can benefit from my coaching, simply because it's like, I know how it feels, believe me.
Yes, yeah. And I was saying this to a client this morning. I There's reassurance in realizing that other people are going through these things. It's so interesting to me how often people think that they're the only one going through this or that, right? Uh, there's so many people who are feeling this way. So let's dive into this. Change won't happen overnight, because I'm sure there are many people who are saying, "Oh, heck yes. Heck yes, Dr. Guan. Change won't happen overnight." So tell us about your perspective on this concept of change won't happen overnight.
So you see, change is not going to happen overnight, and many people before me have said it, many people before you have said it, right? So for me, it was sitting on the couch and saying, all right, yes, I can say it, but it's not sinking in. So the
Hmm.
first step actually was, what can I do about myself for this really to sink into my heart? And so I start
Mm.
living it. Otherwise, every morning you go to the bathroom mirror and you give yourself the pep talk, right? We've all been there. You can do it. You can do it. You'll remember. You have the flashcards,
Yes.
the reminders on your phone, but then you're just upset and all the emotional upheaval just grabs you and swirls you, and next time you remember, it's late at night when you're ready to go to bed.
Mm.
So what helped me was to recognize that it's not a brand new topic and it's not something that you can't do. It's more of a habit. Like if you want to become a basketball player, you don't expect that to happen overnight. And you don't need the pep talk to know that you're not going to be the basketball player tomorrow.
Mhm.
But then you go to work and you expect to contribute to your team overnight. They just hired you and you have to do it.
Mm.
So my question is like, how come I can accept this in basketball, but I cannot accept and I forget about work? So that made it a little bit quite helpful for me to recognize that I already had the understanding. I had the
Mm.
process. I've been there. So the new part is not like, wow, I need to build a patience. No, you have the patience. If you have if you have played a sport or piano or anything, or even if you bake a cake, you already have the patience. So the challenge was simply to learn to practice those skills in a new aspect of my life. So that gave me a lot of confidence. It's like, I can deal with that. It's not brand new. I don't have to go take a class. I don't have to call myself names. I can't just say I'm not good at that, because you already are doing it in one of aspects of your life. Perhaps it's cooking, baking, perhaps it's growing, raising new children. I challenge our listeners here, or viewers, think of one aspect of your life where you have been going through the steps and you know that you have to, there is no shortcut. That means you're already there. You're only one step of recognition that you can take that process and apply it to changes and expect that.
Yes, I love that. So it's recognizing that there is proof all around us that
Yes.
we can change and are changing. And we get to look at different contexts, right? As you said,
Yeah.
basketball, baking. We get to look in these other places of our life for this proof that change is possible for us. We are already doing it. We are already patient. It's funny. I often say that becoming a mother was the gift of patience for me. It was the catalyst for realizing it was one of my greatest areas to grow in. And I definitely now see that I have been changing over time in my ability to increase my patience, although there's some moments that are tested more than others. But, right? When you think about this idea of change not over, it won't happen overnight, and us looking for that proof, experience of astrology and metaphysics and all of these other tools and systems that you use play into change.
So they all bring their own little unique contribution to my whole picture. And I'll start with astrology because
Please.
it was the most uncomfortable aspect of me to own it and to integrate it, given my physics background.
Mm-hmm.
And for the longest time, I called it the science of cycles. This is how I connect it. To me, when I see astrology, I don't think of the back page of the newspaper. I don't think about YouTube people talking things, or scrolling on the internet telling you how you're gonna deal with your relationship. I see circles. I see the earth going around the sun, the moon going around the earth, and my emotional state cycling through confidence, spaciness, a little bit thoughtfulness, dejection sometimes, and doubts. That's where the inner critic come into play, and then back again to confidence. And so I see these circles emotionally in my own
Wow.
mental landscape. So astrology specifically has helped me a lot in terms of timing. It helps a lot, and that's what it takes away all of the interpretation. You don't need to know if it's going to be a new boyfriend or someone else of your friends is going to walk away from your life. What you need to know is that you're on the up of a cycle, on a down of a cycle, and if you honor it, that's where you kind of tap into the effortless reality. It helps you to
Wow.
say, this too shall pass. I'm not the
Mm.
first one to say it. Go and read the Bible, right? Or someone else, this too shall pass. But to me, it felt very kind of superficial. Yeah, this too shall pass. This is just too easy, like a cop out. But seeing the cycles and seeing how they play every month for the moon, or every 29 years for our business and career, which is connected to our inner critic. Can you do things? Oh, you didn't do it well. Seeing how it helps my clients, because I always say, hey, let's look at the cycle. Let's not interpret anything. I don't know what your life is. I'm not a fortune teller, but with the cycles, you can see these ups and downs, and it can put a time, it can put a stamp or an ending of, this too shall pass. I don't know how it is. To me, it gives me patience. It
Yeah.
helps me out. This is not just some inspirational quote on social media. This is
Mm-hmm.
the way how the universe operates. which
Wow.
kind of links to my physics background. But anyway.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that very much. And as you were describing that, the way it landed for me was how I see the concept of seasons. There is a season for this. You're in this season in your life or in your business or in your marriage or with your children. Like you're in a season,
Mhm.
and then a new season comes, and then what are the changes in the processes that come with that, right? Like that's essentially
Yes.
what you were just saying.
Yes, and in a very Western concept, you don't have to connect the end to the beginning. That's what you're going to see in astrology, that it's a cycle. Even if you don't connect it into a circle, in everyday professional terms, we talk about processes. There's a
Yes.
process, there's a grieving process, there's a process of you acquiring skills,
Mhm.
there's a process. I recently changed my jobs, and it was a very challenging time. It took me 2 years because it was not just a job change, but it was almost like a career pivot. And
Wow.
it took a lot of navel gazing and reflection. Who am
Mhm.
I? What value do I bring to society? How do I
Mhm.
put together my experience in a conventional resume so people can see it? And I had to apply uh, for 15 jobs in the span of 2 years. And I have to admit, there were a lot of ups and downs. I was like,
Yes.
why is nobody seeing me? I will never be
Mm.
able to convince anybody that I have skills.
Yes.
But looking back, I did make this, just this past May, I made the connection, and I landed in a job where
Mm.
my colleagues put so much more value to what
Mhm.
I offer compared to my previous job. Um, Simply because I had outstayed my welcome there, right? Sometimes you
Mm.
just outgrow those
Yes.
stages, and you can offer so much more, but you're in a position where people around you are not ready to accept that. So it
Mhm.
causes tremendous internal conflict and pressure. But going back to that job process, looking back, it was a process, and there were times when I threw temper tantrums. Only my husband knows how many times. But the goal is, as you work through what I have seen, and this links to our change discussion of change. What I've noticed, another pattern with the changes, is that not only it's a process, but the process is kind of following a spiral pattern. So the
Mm.
goal is not to say I'm better today and I'll never lapse, but to
Mm.
space out the lapses. So every
Mm.
time, if you see more days or more months before you lapses, and you get yourself out of that lapse faster, you're on the right track.
Yes. Yes. I love that.
It
I
was
love that.
it was an amazing aha moment for myself.
Mm.
Nobody had told me. I had never seen it in the books, because you go into the inspirational books, the spiritual
Mhm.
books, the conventional books, and everybody shares their success stories, but they don't really show the process. You don't see the tripping
Mhm.
points. And for me, using my academic background, my scientific mindset, wait a minute, there's a pattern here. And the
Mhm.
pattern is that give yourself that space for the spiral, because it's
Mhm.
very easy when we fall to say, never mind, this is not going to work, I'm not good enough. This is where, the inner
Mhm.
critic comes into place. But if you already know that this is part of the natural process, you're not so dismayed. You just start counting how many days before you snap out of it. And so if
Mhm.
you're going in the wrong direction, every time you'll be faster, the snapping out will be faster,
Yep.
and the days in between the falls will be longer. And I say,
Mm.
you're on the right path. The goal is
Yes.
to straighten that journey in life gently, right? Stretching the
Mhm.
spiral.
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and it has worked. That has been one of the most profound insights that I reached through my own experience.
Yeah. And I would also say I would add to that. I love that stretching out, and not staying in the negative doubt state for as long, right?
Mhm.
Aiming to be um, aiming for the place of even keel,
Yes.
right? Very,
Um,
very cool.
I started incorporating it into my own coaching. And so with clients, and it's so easy, you probably know, they come as like, oh, it's not going to work. Oh, I
Mhm.
lapsed. Oh, I'm so awful. Oh, I'll And so what I started doing is I started inviting them to journal something
Mm.
very simple. Rank how bad it was. Okay,
Mhm.
how long did it take you to snap out of it, and
Yeah.
how long before you fell again? And so put it in that journal and keep track, because we forget. uh, and then you go back last year, you see all of a sudden you were upset every week, and now you're upset every 2 months. In my book, that's a
Yes.
tremendous progress.
Yes.
And you have put some scientific twist on it. You have an
The data.
objective proof. That's my scientist, right? Everybody likes
I love
data,
it.
and I'm like, this is your data. And it is awesome to see this aha moment in my clients' eyes as well. It's like, you're right. It used to take me a whole year, or it used to take
Mhm.
me a whole week just to recover from this conversation. And now I was there only for one day, but they started
Yeah.
with like a whole day. I was upset. I was like, wait.
Yeah, you've improved.
Yeah.
You've seen the difference. Yeah. And I really, one thing I like about the data piece is it is a way for you to look back, as you're saying, and see your growth over time. Uh, but it also, I love having people make notes about things, that they're working on, because it allows for them to know where they want to focus next. So if we're not tracking how we're behaving, as you said, we'll just forget. And the next time you have a conversation with a coach, or your accountability partner, whoever you're being accountable with, the next time you're just like, oh, well, I was down for some time and then I was up, or I was really down this whole month. And I would call the person out and be like, the whole month? Really? The whole month? And they're like, well, actually, no. It was probably like 2 days. But our mind loses track of this time space, right? So if you can create that very simple tool to track and have the data, then we have more clear information to work from versus whole month, 2 days. You know, are you blowing things out of proportion, making things even worse? Or was it actually better than you're saying? And you get to actually see that you're doing better than you think.
Exactly. Writing is amazing, in that
Mhm.
tracking. And I welcome all the new apps on your phone. Some of them can
Mm.
actually make it so easy for you. You don't even have to
Mhm.
write. You can just speak, and they'll just record, and then you can search or ask, on which day did I get upset? Or it's amazing, the new
Yes.
technology nowadays.
Yeah.
So I encourage everybody to pick whatever is good, or whatever they like.
Yeah.
Paper, old-fashioned paper, or technological app, it doesn't matter, but just to explore. And as you said, I liked what you said about we're taking ourselves too seriously and we're blowing things out of proportion, because it's a kind of mixture of emotions and inner critic, and
Mhm.
they are the explosive bunch. The two of
Yes.
them in astrology, we follow the moon and the Saturn, and that is where you're ping pong between your emotions, where you exaggerate, and your inner critic say, "Oh, you'll never do anything,"
Mhm.
and you start rewriting the whole past, your whole life. You're rewriting your goals, also in objectives. And so I hear you having those objectives placed there on the piece of paper, and you're saying, "Wait a minute, didn't we start with that?" And they say, "Oh, that's right. We solved that one."
Mhm. Wait
Right?
a minute,
So,
right?
yes,
Well, and
good.
I think as we wrap up this conversation of change won't happen overnight, if you use the tool of making notes in some way, whether it's written, whether it's in an app, whether it's wherever it is, if you have that data, it may feel to those who don't track it that it either happens overnight or it's taken forever to
Yes.
happen. When in fact, if you have the data, we don't have to guess,
Mhm. Yes.
right?
Yes. And there's one unexpected kind of side benefit, like a little perk that I like to point um, our attention to, is that when something takes long to accomplish, it's also slow to disappear away from your life.
Mm.
And it boosts my strength, because I say, well, okay, it took me 2 years to get a job. I don't have to worry that something will happen tomorrow and miss it. There are no guarantees in the physical world, but there is some emotional pattern there that
Mm.
this is a solid job. I didn't go there and grab the first thing that came my mind. I didn't have to skew my resume. I did spend the time to present my unique self. In fact, finally, by the time I got to the job interview, I had this attitude of, this is me, take me or leave me, this is it. And they chose. And this is what I'm saying. The confidence that I don't have to go to work and feel like the imposter syndrome or trying to please people because otherwise I'm going to lose my job because of that long process. So it is a great reminder for when we say, okay, it takes forever. But if it takes forever to get it, that means it's going to take forever to lose it.
I like that. I like that belief. Very, very cool. It was such a pleasure chatting with you today, and I think we could chat far, far longer. I think we could go on for some time, but I really appreciate you being here today and sharing your beautiful insights and your clear energy of what you're meant to do in this world.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, and thank you for having me. It has been a great pleasure.
Oh, amazing. And to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in once again to Power to the People Pleasers. Please stay tuned for our next episode.